some people shouldn't be parents. This is an unfortunate reality that probably everyone reading this knows to be true. If you haven't come into contact firsthand with someone who shouldn't be a parent, there is no doubt that you have heard about terrible parents. One doesn't need to peruse the news very long to find terrible examples of children being abused or neglected by their parents. Granted, most of the cases one hears about in the news are extreme in their nature, but it doesn't take away from the fact that there are countless parents who care little about their children. This is obviously a difficult phenomenon for most people to understand. Parents are supposed to be the providers and protectors of their children, and usually give them unconditional love, so when one of these cases comes to our attention, it is rightfully viewed as one of the ultimate betrayals. The reasons why some parents are abusive toward their children are many and complex and have filled entire volumes of psychology books. For whatever reason, some people just aren't fit or prepared for the role of parent, which sometimes can be thrust on a person unexpectedly. Because many children are born to unwanted parents, adoption has been traditionally seen as a good alternative to provide those children with loving homes. And usually adoptive parents are some of the most dedicated parents there are. Children of adoption tend to be well adjusted on average, and the rates of abuse and neglect are much lower than in traditional families. But of course there are always exceptions. A recent case from the United Kingdom demonstrates that sometimes adoptive parents can be just as abusive, if not worse, than natural parents. Matthew and Craig Scully-Hicks are a married gay couple from Britain who met in Portugal in 2008. After seeing each other for nearly 4 years, the two men decided to marry in 2012 and planned to eventually start a family. The couple lived a comfortable life in Cardiff, Wales, with Matt working as a fitness instructor and trainer in the area, and Craig working in the corporate world. Craig was the primary breadwinner in the relationship, and his job often took him away from home for days and even weeks at a time. Matt was extremely health conscious and not what one would call a party boy, but he did like to socialise with friends, dining out and visiting cultural attractions such as museums and theatres. He was committed to Craig but enjoyed a certain level of freedom at the same time. The men appeared to have a solid relationship and were happy. But for some reason they thought adoption was a good idea. By all accounts, they genuinely believed that they could give an unwanted child a good home, but the tragic results of their adoption show that they were woefully psychologically unprepared to be parents. The social services conducting the adoption only saw 2 well-adjusted young men, but underneath one of them was a rage waiting to be unleashed. Shayla O'Brien had little chance in life, and unfortunately, those who were supposed to protect her failed miserably. She was born to a drug-addicted mother in 2014 and quickly put into foster care. By all accounts, her foster parents treated her well, but she was placed into the adoption pool. Adoptions are tightly controlled by the government in the United Kingdom, and while issues such as familial relations is considered, they are not always the deciding factor. Shayla's maternal grandmother wanted her to come back home. She knew that her daughter was still unable to care for her. She couldn't even care for herself at the time, but she hoped that by gaining guardianship, Shayla would be reunited with her mother one day. In January 2015, I started proceedings in the family court to become the legal guardian for Shayla, said her grandma Cian O'Brien. I wanted to bring her up in a happy, healthy and warm family environment. That was all taken away from me when social services and the family court decided I would not be able to cope. The courts believed that Cian was too old and had too much going on in her life to give Shayla the kind of care a child her age needs, so she was placed in the adoption pool. Since Shayla was a cute, young and bubbly little girl, there were plenty of prospective families that wanted to bring her home. The Scully-Hicks family won the competition. The courts ruled that due to their combined incomes, their stable backgrounds, and the fact that Matt would be home most of the time, the Scully-Hicks family would be a good choice. Shayla was legally adopted by the 2 men on May 12, 2016, and her name was changed to Elsie Scully-Hicks. Shortly after bringing Elsie home, Craig left on business and would see his adopted daughter very little. Most of the parenting chores were left to Matt, who was unwilling and or unable to cope with the immense responsibility. As soon as Craig left, the abuse began. In the 2 weeks between May 12th and May 25th, Matt brought the toddler to the local emergency room numerous times for treatment for numerous bruises, cuts and abrasions to her head and body. Every time Matt told the emergency room doctors that the injuries were the result of accidents. She fell down the stairs, she ran into a door, or she hurt herself while he was in the other room. For some reason, the staff never questioned him much. The reality is that Matt was using the poor little girl as a punching bag. Although no one saw Matt physically abuse Elsie, He referred to her in derogatory ways a number of times in front of friends and acquaintances. He was clearly over his head as a parent and frustrated with the situation. But instead of telling his partner, he gave the impression that everything was fine. It was not as if Craig seemed to care much himself. He was gone for much of the 2 weeks that Elsie was under their charge and never questioned Matt's explanations for her numerous trips to the hospital. In the 2 weeks between May 12th and May 25th, Matt brought the toddler to the local emergency room numerous times for treatment for numerous bruises, cuts and abrasions to her head and body. Every time Matt told the emergency room doctors that the injuries were the result of accidents. She fell down the stairs, she ran into a door, or she hurt herself while he was in the other room. For some reason, the staff never questioned him much. The reality is that Matt was using the poor little girl as a punching bag. Although no one saw Matt physically abuse Elsie, he referred to her in derogatory ways a number of times in front of friends and acquaintances. He was clearly over his head as a parent and frustrated with the situation. But instead of telling his partner, he gave the impression that everything was fine. It was not as if Craig seemed to care much himself. He was gone for much of the 2 weeks that Elsie was under their charge and never questioned Matt's explanations for her numerous trips to the hospital. Finally, on May 25th, Elsie's little body could no longer withstand the abuse. Matt brought her to the hospital one last time that day, but she later died. Since the child died, the hospital staff were required to call the local police on this occasion. The coroner's report showed that Elsie died as the result of severe trauma from being shaken. Matt Scully-Hicks was promptly charged with murder in the death of his adopted child. Craig stood by Matthew during the court proceedings, paying for his defence team and attending his trial. Although Matthew had high-quality lawyers in his corner, the forensic evidence was pretty straightforward and clearly indicated his guilt. Possibly out of hubris, Matthew decided that he wouldn't try to plead to a lesser charge or ask for a plea bargain, and instead took the case to trial. His lawyers argued that the massive injuries Elsie sustained could have been the result of numerous accidents, as he claimed. Public opinion in the UK was firmly against Scully-Hicks, and he was quite possibly the most hated man in the country in 2017. The public watched the trial anxiously via the media until the verdict was announced in November 2017. Guilty. No one was really surprised by the verdict, but most were relieved. Scully-Hicks was handed a life sentence with a minimum of 18 years to be served behind bars. It was Elsie's behaviour, your frustration with it, which turned to anger, which led you to inflict the serious injuries which swiftly led to her collapse, said Judge Nicola Davies. Due to the case's high profile and the nature of the crime, numerous threats have been made on Scully-Hicks's life. After he was sent to a Welsh prison, he was placed in a segregated cell block to protect him from the other inmates. As Scully-Hicks sits in protective custody for 23 hours a day, he will have plenty of time to contemplate where his life went wrong and how many lives he's destroyed by his actions. The reality of the situation, though, as terrible as it is, can be summed up in a simple sentence. Some people shouldn't be parents. Hey friends, thank you for listening to today's story. Make sure to click the notification icon to stay updated on all future narrations. I release new videos twice every day at 10 AM and 8 PM Eastern Time. If you have a story to share, please send it to the email displayed on the screen. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like and leave an encouraging comment. It really helps me keep bringing you more narrations like this. If you'd like to support the channel even more, you can get early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.